Hello, welcome to Let's Escape episode 2. Yeah, we made a second one. It actually happened. This is a show about basically there's a lot of sad people out there at the minute who are having troubles, and I don't think it's their fault. I think we've got a lot of problems in our society, in our world that we don't really want to acknowledge. So I'm going to look at those problems and ask, what can we do as individuals to be happy in a messed up society? And there's songs too, because everything's better with a song. So a question I want you to ask today is, do you ever feel like you're not enough? Like you should be achieving and doing more? And that if you could earn a little bit more money and get the things you need, would you be happier? What if I told you that your entire life people you'd never met have been subliminally telling you that you're not good enough? It sounds a bit rich, doesn't it? But we should be pissed off by this. This episode we're looking at advertising. We talk about the human race as if it's like a giant competition, but the people that we look up to most often have the most negative impact on the world around us. People who fly around in private jets, throw lavish parties and have lots of houses. They have a huge carbon footprint, and let's face it, these kind of people who have more than one house, when there's so many people all over the world without roofs over their heads, they're assholes. These people are completely unbearable, but for some reason we aspire to be these people. So what is it that makes us think that the needless accumulation of material goods will make us happy? Why do we think that eating all the pies equates to winning the human race? And when did being an asshole become being successful? All this will be explained right here, right now, as we escape from advertising. Jingle.
This is Let's Escape, a podcast about being happy and healthy in a toxic society.
So, are your L'Oreal worth it? Did you just do it? Are your clothes fairy soft? Was your bucket of dead poultry finger-licking good? Do your Rice Krispies tell you snap, crackle and pop? Did Red Bull give you wings? Did you get your ooh with Typhoo? Maybe it wasn't Maybelline. Are those makeup artists really using Max Factor? Did Tresemme really start in salons? Are diamonds really forever? Is the Milky Bar Kid really in town? Are Kellogg's Frosties really that great? Have you ever received a last Rolo? And do beans really mean Heinz? No, these are just some of the meaningless, vacuous slogans that are shoveled into our semi-conscious brains while we're trying to get from one pit of life to another. But at some point, they have all convinced millions of people to spend their hard-earned money on something that 99% of the time they didn't actually need. So how does that work? Advertising firstly tells us that there's something wrong with us, what's missing. Then it shows us a world where everything is amazing and shows us a product and says, this is how perfect people are perfect. Basically, advertising sells us things by making us feel like we're incomplete. And think about everywhere we go, we can't escape it. It's literally everywhere, showing you how shiny everything could be if you had more money, constantly calling us inadequate and impotent. And to my mind, that's not on. That's a violation of us as humans. To be healthy, we need to feel complete. Think about like if another human followed you around constantly telling you that you weren't good enough, we call that an abusive relationship. And our relationship with advertising is controlling, it's psychologically abusive. We just don't recognise it because we've been subject to these patterns of abuse and manipulation for our entire lives. Feeling inferior just feels normal. If you don't believe me, consider this. How many times have you heard of children being murdered for a pair of trainers? And where do those kids get those ideas from? All they're doing is taking literally the messages that society told them. If you don't have Nike trainers, you're worthless. So strap in, we're going to take on the advertising industry together, and we're going to fucking beat it. Let's Escape versus advertising. Let's Escape versus advertising. Advertising is running out of the Let's Escape podcast ninja fighting, changing outlooks as fast as lightning through the prism of a knuckles into prism. Let's Escape versus advertising. The artist Banksy put it really well when he said this about advertising.
I'm going to do this in my Banksy voice. People are taking the piss out of you every day. They butt into your life, take a cheap shot at you and then disappear. They leer at you from tall buildings and make you feel small. They make flippant comments from buses that imply you're not sexy enough and all the fun is happening somewhere else. They're on your TV making your girlfriend feel inadequate. They have access to the most sophisticated technology the world has ever seen and they bully you with it. They are the advertisers and they are laughing at you. You, however, are forbidden to touch them. Trademarks, intellectual property rights and copyright law mean advertisers can say what they like with complete impunity. Fuck that. Any advert in a public space that gives you no choice whether you see it or not is yours. It's yours to take, rearrange and reuse. You can do whatever you like with it. Asking for permission is like asking to keep a rock someone just threw at your head. You owe the companies nothing, less than nothing. You especially don't owe them any courtesy. They owe you. They have rearranged the world and put themselves in front of you. They never asked for your permission, so don't start asking for theirs.
Those are some pretty powerful words from old Banksy there. And that's a good mindset to start a journey in. When advertising started off, it was a lot more honest, a lot more direct. Adverts would say things like, use Peterson soap to clean your hands, or for a sturdy, reliable automobile, drive a Stanley. There was little or no subtext. The advert communicated its meaning at face value and expected the reader to make a decision based on the information they'd been given. But everything changed with a man called Edward Bernays. Bernays was a bit of a tool. He was the nephew of Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, dead famous bloke, and he was super fascinated by his uncle's discoveries about the workings of the human mind, so he absorbed his uncle's work and he decided to use it for pure evil. He took his uncle's discoveries for healing people and figured out how to use them as a marketing tool. He wrote a really famous book called Propaganda, but eventually he realised that name was tainted, so he came up with a new name for propaganda and he called it public relations. He was like the public relations person for public relations. So yeah, Bernays was the father of PR. His first big break was making propaganda for President Woodrow Wilson, helping him to sell World War I as a mission for democracy in Europe. Hitler had a lot of admiration for Allied propaganda and he praised it in his book Mein Kampf. And the Nazi propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels has expressed massive admiration for Bernays' technique. After the war, Bernays turned his hand to manipulating the American public into buying things that they didn't want or need. His tactic was to use psychology to market things subliminally, outside of the normal systems of advertising. So, for example, in his early career, he was hired by a piano company to sell pianos. And he did this by paying lifestyle magazines to write these articles about this fictitious new craze for music rooms in houses. And it really caught on. Everybody wanted a music room. And every fashionable house had to have, this space. And consequently, Bernays caused a boom in the sale of pianos without even mentioning the word piano in any of these articles. He was hired by a bacon company to convince Americans that bacon was the all-American breakfast. And even though people at the time weren't really eating bacon as a breakfast food, he did it by paying doctors to say that it was a really good idea to eat bacon in the morning, and adverts associating bacon with America, so you're in New York having bacon and pancakes for breakfast, and that was all invented in the 1950s by this dude as a marketing ploy. And as we now know, having bacon every morning and for breakfast is probably really bad for you. That's not something you want to be doing. possibly the most evil thing that he did was for the benefit of a company called United Fruit, who you'll know today because they're now Chiquita Bananas. So these guys were untouched by this. United Fruit were the company responsible for the phrase Banana Republic because they had control of entire countries for their fruit production. In this case, it was Guatemala in South America. They approached Bernays to help with banana sales, and he did so by putting bananas in the hands of celebrities, like celebrity banana endorsements, in hotel rooms and in other conspicuous places, and he made them fashionable. Everybody wanted bananas. But it wasn't enough for him. He decided that he had to put a positive spin on the countries that were producing bananas too. So he created this thing called the Middle American Information Board to put out a stream of press releases about how amazing bananas are. Guatemala's dictator Jorge Ubica was overthrown, and new leader Juan Jose Arevalo, I think that's right, was democratically elected by 85% of the vote. But Juan Jose Arevalo wanted to break United Fruit's monopoly over the country's banana farming, and he wanted to buy back huge swathes of land that the company had bought for next to nothing and they weren't cultivating. So it was an opportunity to essentially take this entire country out of the hands of a corporation. This would break the banana monopoly, and it could put an end to the massive amounts of poverty in Guatemala. But obviously United Fruit weren't too happy about this because they'd lose their monopoly. So Bernays recommended to United Fruit to invent a communist threat from the country and to put out press releases to all those journalists and academics, convincing them that Guatemala was a hotbed of un-American activity. He sent a report on Guatemala anonymously to every member of Congress and groomed the New York Times to publish articles that were espousing these false ideas. And it worked, but it worked a little too well. In 1954, the CIA effected a military coup in Guatemala to protect American interests. This resulted in decades of civil war and eventually a genocide. So next time you're at the banana store and you see that Chiquita label on banana, maybe go for the fair trade one instead. Banana na 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 na. Banana na 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 na. Banana na 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 na. Banana na 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 na. If you want to buy banana, remember Guatemala. Look for the fair trade sticker, my little chiquitita. I never buy Chiquita. Banana na 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 na. Banana na 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 na. Banana na 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 na. Banana na 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 na.
You're listening to Let's Escape, a podcast about how to be happy in a messed up society. Yeah, man.
What Bernays' legacy is this idea of, instead of using straightforward advertising to sell people products, to manipulate their subconscious, to pull their strings on a subliminal level, and to gain control of their actions. And it's often referred to as nudging, as in nudging the masses towards the opinion that you believe that they should have. And it continues to this day. If you ever see someone on TV from the Taxpayers Alliance or the Adam Smith Institute, these people send out daily press releases as if they're a valid intellectual think tank or something. But in reality, they're funded entirely by business interests and they function for those business interests. So they're essentially adverts on the news. Bernays believed it was possible to, in his words, pull the wires of the public mind and tell the masses how to behave. He had so little respect for the general public, he called them inherently stupid and believed it was his right to manipulate them. He came up with a name for this, which is the engineering of consent. In 2018, as I record this podcast, shows you how long I've been working on it, almost all advertising involves to some degree the subliminal engineering of consent. Studies show that kids under 8 are defenseless from advertising and don't understand the concept of intent to sell. They take advertising claims at face value, and that means that every single advertisement you saw before the age of 8 You full on believed. You took it as the truth. And why wouldn't you? Why would you believe that adults are lying to you 24 hours a day? And now we know they are. Don't trust the grown-ups, kids. That means that since you're a child, you've believed that women were meant to look like Barbie, blonde-haired, airy and unrealistically thin with boobs so big that in real life it would be impossible for her to stand up. We believe subconsciously that men are meant to be action men, ripped like steroids, violent, athletic, totally in control all the time, but somehow with no body hair, because men in the world of advertising are prepubescent somehow. I've written plenty of fluids. What the hell does that mean? Oh, that was me talking to my doctor while I was writing the script. We're taught to believe that if we buy the right products, we'll never grow old and we'll be in this sort of Dorian Gray-like status, with our body at its firmest, most perfect shape, but never quite completing puberty. Our bodies are never allowed to show wrinkles or pubic hair. We're not allowed to gain weight. Moreover, in adverts, we only see like the skinniest 5% of the population, and they're caked in makeup and photoshopped until every glimmer of imperfection is just erased. We see people digitally thinned by computers to weights that body shapes that just wouldn't be achievable in real life. We're shown that these strange thin people are eating a diet of burgers, crisps and chocolate, never gaining any weight. We see young men driving cars that they can never possibly afford, and young women have an endless supply of expensive perfumes and unrealistically clean and well-fitting clothes. And somehow owning these products make these strange young beauties instantly attract the opposite sex. It seemingly doesn't matter if they have a personality or not, or if they've never even had a conversation. It's just like animal magnetism. And these people that we're seeing, they never seem to work or do anything they don't want to do. They seem to be constantly driving down deserted roads and running along beaches and surfing, man, and filming everything on their smartphones, tablets, GoPros and camera products without ever even having to pay for these devices. They seem to feel no sadness or insecurity, and they use sex and violence like play. They make it cool to fuck and punch, and there's never any consequences. They seem so perfect, and it's a beautiful lie, because what a world that would be. That's the world that advertising creates, but we all have to catch flu and look like shit sometimes, and we all have to... Sometimes we get fat and hairy, and that's okay. Sometimes we fart in bed, sometimes we smell because we've been at work all day, and we're sweaty, and we're tired, and we're not happy, and that's okay. That's part of the flux of life. So don't beat yourself up about it. Yeah, you smelly bastard. Just kidding, you smell lovely. I can smell you through this microphone. That's a bit weird. Moving on. So these ideas were buried deep into our brains before we even had the critical thinking skills to question them, which is when they want to get us. And we know it's not real, but it still hurts. It still hurts us that adulthood isn't a whirlwind of money, consumer goods and physical perfection, though, because we were promised this from infancy. We feel like there's something wrong with us, that we can't obtain this impossible level of ideal. But there's not. We're fucking awesome. You take it from me, mate. You are incredible. You're beautiful, intelligent, unique, and you're exactly who you're meant to be. You're just where you're meant to be. You're doing fine, so cut yourself some fucking slack. Like Nina Simone says, you've got life, you've got your body and your soul, and that's all you need to be happy. So love yourself. Here's a song about loving yourself. You've got to love yourself. You've got to love yourself. It's good for your mental health. So pull your socks up and love yourself. You got to love you like I love you. I'm always thinking of you. I really want to lick you, but I won't, cause that might make you feel awkward, yeah. You might think that's a little bit weird, so I'm afraid you got to lick yourself. You You'll have to lick yourself. It's salty and it's healthy, probably. You'll have to lick yourself. Lick yourself.
You're listening to the Let's Escape podcast, and it's just got a little bit weird. We're talking about how to be happy in a messed up society.
Life is short. Like Tom Cruise. Treasure yourself while you can, because when you're 6 feet down pushing up them daisies, you can't go back and give yourself the love and validation that you deserved in life. You gotta give it now. Truth. Right, okay. I'm gonna get down off my soapbox now. In recent years, companies and political forces have discovered an even more sinister tool than they've ever had before. In 2013, a gentleman called Matt, a closeted gay man, began getting Facebook page suggestions for a coming out coach called Rick Clemens. Apparently that's the thing, you can get a coming out coach. The thing is, Matt had never posted anything on Facebook that suggested he was gay, and he was really private about his sexuality. And later on he told BuzzFeed this. He said, "As many LGBT individuals know, for a time the most closely held secret we have is our sexuality. Several nights ago, I texted a close and dear friend asking for advice and revealing such sensitive and personal information. The next morning, I woke up to a sponsored story on my Facebook page that asked, 'Coming out? Need help?' How did Facebook know such a specific ad was applied to my profile?" Why indeed, Matt? The answer is targeted advertising. Facebook collects data on not just every single word we write, but even every word we type and delete as well. That messed my head up. Literally everything about you Facebook knows, and in some ways, it actually knows us better than we know ourselves. Facebook even scans and logs our private messages and our Google searches. They've even accessed our device microphones. They listen to what we're doing. Facebook is the biggest pervert in your life. They know everything. What Facebook does with this data is to sell it pretty recklessly to interested parties. It allows them to target individuals that will be vulnerable to a certain kind of advert, product or idea. For example, in the UK's Brexit referendum, the Vote Leave campaign was shown to have illegally overspent massively on illegal targeted Facebook advertising, spreading xenophobic and anti-European information to people who were particularly vulnerable to those ideas. The whistleblower who made these revelations was then outed as gay in revenge publicly in the news, when even his family didn't know about his sexual orientation. There's even a story about a young girl who was pregnant but decided to keep it from her parents, for whatever reasons, those are her reasons. Through targeted advertising and Facebook data, the company Target began sending her coupons for cribs, nappies and baby gear, even determining her due date to be August, which I don't know how they worked that out, but they did. And by doing this, her parents were alerted. They were like, "What's going on? Why have we got all this baby stuff?" And she was forced to tell her parents against her will. And this is really reminiscent of George Orwell's 1984, which predicts a world where propaganda and misinformation are used to control the helpless populace. What does that remind you of? Orwell's dystopian vision has already been played out in China and the Soviet Union and all kinds of places all over the world. USA, I would say, one of those places as well, if you look into the CIA. And elements of it have been playing out in Western society for forever. It's essential reading in the 21st century, so if you've not read 1984, it will scare the living crap out of you, but it's a good thing to do, because we all need to be more educated. Truth. So, if we're being tricked into thinking that we need material goods, products and ideologies to be happy, what do we actually need to be happy in the real world? What are the basics? Well, this was all worked out by an American dude called Abraham Maslow, a psychologist dude, who came up with the catchily titled Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs. This tends to be depicted as a pyramid, and at the bottom of the pyramids are all the physical needs like food, water, warmth and rest, and then up the pyramid there's like all the emotional needs as well. But it's really quite wordy and difficult to explain, so here is a song. Yeah, it's a bit cheesy, but I hope you like it. Maslow, 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 Maslow Food, water, warmth and rest.
These are the things we like the best.
Safety and security.
These things are quite important to me.
Belongingness and feeling love.
Friendship and family can make enough.
Achievement and accomplishment.
The top of that Maslow pyramid when
Self-actualization, the realization that we've reached our full potential. Proven that we're capable and that it doesn't need any capital.
the best things in life are free, like most of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Take it away, boys. Tell them all about it.
Maslow, food, water, warmth and rest.
These are the things we like the best.
Safety and security.
These things are quite important to me.
Belongingness and feeling love.
Friendship and family can make enough.
Achievement and accomplishment.
The top of that Maslow pyramid went
Self-actualization, the realization that we reached our full potential. Proven that we're capable and that it didn't need any capital.
The best things in life are free, like most of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Remember that next time you're down in the dumps. Maslow.
What Maslow tells us is that as long as you can feed yourself and have a roof over your head, you have the building blocks to find happiness. If your mind and your aspirations are aligned in a healthy way, you don't really need anything to achieve happiness. You kind of came out the womb as a complete kit, you're already a complete human. We don't need add-ons. What advertising kind of does is to hijack these last two needs, esteem and actualization, and it tells us that to be a complete person, we need this car, or this toothpaste, or that computer, or too much makeup, or the right shaving equipment, or a new set of fashionable clothes every few months. It's bollocks. We don't need this stuff. Of course, the truth is that the pressure we put ourselves under working insane jobs to try and earn the ridiculous amounts of dosh we need to buy a never-ending food chain of shit, we can never really relax long enough to feel happy and fulfilled, and the most important things in life are the bits where we're chilling out and having fun. So it creates a feedback loop of buy. A life without time for space, friendship, love and freedom and creativity is just life wasted, really. And they have us pissing away our lives on a treadmill that will never slow down, and it's never slow down. Treadmill will never slow down, and it'll never let us rest. Do you ever notice that in a recession, governments will say that we need to get people to buy more to stimulate the high street? And do you ever just feel like screaming at the TV, we don't have any more to give. There's no more money left. You've had everything. What more do you want from me? Maybe that's just me. I'm a bit nuts. Or am I? You should tell me. You can message me and tell me what you think of all this at Sam of the X on the Twitter sphere and the Facebooky Booksfizz. Adverts make us think everything we need is for sale, when in reality, almost everything we need is free. Bar sort of food and stuff like that. Even that's free. You can forage the hedgerows or whatever, or, eat your own game. So quid pro quo, the solution is
Stop buying stuff.
Stop buying stuff. Imagine for a sec if people advertised the things that were good for us. Imagine adverts for fruit and vegetables, for relaxation and play. Imagine adverts for conflict resolution and social responsibility.
Sounds a bit lame, to be honest.
Non-Violent Movies presents the action-free movie of the summer. Did you just knock over my beer? Well, actually I did. Sorry, that was my bad. Did I wet you? A negligible amount of liquid fell upon my sleeve. I'm really sorry about that. I can buy you another beverage with a fresh one from the bar. The amount of liquor spilled was minor. No drink replacement is necessary. Can I buy you another drink anyway and get to know you better? Then we've taken the unfortuitous act of me spilling my drink on you and turned it into the positive act of making a new friend. That would be pleasing. My macho appearance has rendered me lonely, and I would like another male to emotionally interface with. Tell me, do you watch Game of Thrones? Two men, comfortable with their masculinity. All thrills, negligible spills. Conflict resolution, the movie. Coming March 2019 to a cinema near you.
Nah, it won't work, mate.
Fun fact, in Malaysia, adverts may not contain nudity, seductive clothes, or disco dancing. Any ads you might see may look a little bit ridiculous, like a car ad that just has like a few words and a logo, and it seemingly doesn't make any sense. But this is called conditioning advertising. It's like Pavlov's dog, who's trained to salivate when you ring a bell, because he began to associate that bell with food. So if we see a giant big yellow M, or a boo 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 boo, I'm loving it, we immediately associate those colour schemes, designs and melody with this really tasty but highly addictive and unhealthy food. If I drop little hints about this yellow M's and these, it makes you salivate throughout the day, and it makes you go, oh, I really could kill for some of that food, you know? The thing is, when you have that food, it's got very little nutritional value and it'll leave you feeling depressed later in the day. But by doing that, McDonald's is like probably the biggest brand of the 20th century, and it's got some highly questionable ethics. It's like a religion. Another problem with the advertising industry is the conditioning of gender stereotypes, because if they're selling a drill, then it'll be a bloke drilling a hole with a drill, and if it's a kitchen product, a blender, then it'll be a woman blending in the kitchen, because as adults we can go, well, I'm a man, I can use that blender, or I'm a woman, I can use a drill. But if you're a little kid watching that stuff, it's all being processed in your head as women are in the kitchen, men use the drills. These gender roles are so clearly defined because by the time we're able to even discern what a gender role is, it's already programmed into our head and we can't get it out. Another problem is the pink tax. Pink tax is for women's products that are just the colour pink. But there's instances of, for example, a razor company making the same set of razors in black and in pink for men and women, but the women's razors are exactly the same, apart from the colour pink, and they're 50 pence more, because the razor companies have worked out that women will pay 50 pence more for a razor because they have that slightly higher value of self-image. What the companies say is, if women want to use the razors, if that's a problem, then they can just get a black razor. It's only the colour that's the difference. But some people's gender identities are that deeply ingrained inside them that they can't use the man razor. They have to have the pink razor, otherwise they're not a woman anymore. So that's just crazy in my head, but that's the level of conditioning that we have as human beings. And the pink products are always a little bit more expensive because they know that people will pay for them. By far the most chilling tale of manipulation of the public through advertising is the popularisation of cigarettes. It's quite close to my heart because my dad suffers from emphysema. He's got a lot of problems for his lungs that have come from smoking. And they're horrible things. They do nothing good for you. You know, they don't even get you high. They're just like a little bit of a desperate boost before the next cigarette. And as far back as the 1920s, people knew that cigarettes were linked with cancer. Like from right at the beginning, they were found to contain poisons like arsenic and lead, and people were trying to break from their smoking habits. So manufacturers desperately needed to convince the public to smoke, even though they knew it would kill them. So they started to play dirty. Advertisers would place cigarette sponsorship and product placement in every TV show, movie, radio show, everywhere. Like, they made the question not, do you smoke, but what's your brand? Sexy women, athletes, teenagers, astronauts, scientists, and of course Santa Claus were all pictured smoking to sell these horrible products. The companies worked out pretty quickly that adult non-smokers are very unlikely to change their habits, and if they wanted to attract fresh smokers, they had to market to children, and they did. They loved marketing to children. And this practice continues till today. In the early 1950s, medical institutions started to warn against smoking more and more, and the advertisers deliberately attempted to shed doubt on those warnings by hiring doctors to tell people in advertising that cigarettes were good for them, essentially. Not saying that cigarettes were good, but I'll give you an example. Here's a camel ad from the period. You know, if you were to follow a busy doctor as he makes his daily rounds and calls, you'd find yourself having a mighty busy time keeping up with him. Time out for many men of medicine usually means just long enough to enjoy a cigarette. And because they know what a pleasure it is to smoke a mild, good-tasting cigarette, They're particular about the brand they choose. In a repeated national survey, doctors in all parts of the country, doctors in every brand of medicine were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" In this nationwide survey of general practitioners, surgeons, throat specialists, diagnosticians, and so on, the brand most named was Camel. Yes, according to this survey, more doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. See how Camels agree with your throat. See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be. If you notice, the advertisers were trying to negate the fear of throat cancer by constantly mentioning how good it is for your throat. Fake doctor testimony gave addicted smokers an excuse to keep going. In the 1940s, a company called Lucky Strike realised that they weren't selling any cigarettes to women. And not content with poisoning half the population, they wanted to poison the whole population. So they hired the biggest name in advertising to help them sell that product. And it's our friend Edward Bernays. He was given the task of making women smoke. And it wasn't going to be easy either, because at the time, smoking was considered to be the domain of prostitutes and loose women and sort of femme fatales. Bernays' answer was to use feminism and the liberation of women, a movement with a lot of power and public support, as a lever to manipulate women into killing themselves by smoking. He placed debutantes in the New York Easter Parade, and he paid them to all light up at the same time and claimed it was a protest against the taboo against women smoking. He claimed this was part of the suffrage movement, and he christened the cigarettes Torches of Freedom to, I quote, protest man's inhumanity to women by the taboo against smoking. And it worked. It really, really worked. Within 6 weeks, women smoking was considered completely acceptable. One of his Lucky Strike magazine ads read, "An ancient prejudice has been removed. Today, legally, politically, and socially, womanhood stands in her true light. American intelligence has cast aside the ancient prejudice that held her to be inferior by allowing her to smoke Lucky Strike." So, by taking something really beautiful and important for the world, the liberation of women, and twisting it into selling a product that is incredibly bad for women, he convinced the women of America to smoke, resulting in an unthinkable amount of deaths. Parade made the international news, and all over the world, women smoking became associated with liberation. This is such a great example of manipulation through advertising, using the positive association to manipulate the hearts and minds of good people into doing bad things to themselves. Out of the million voices we hear every day, how many are motivating us to do the right thing, and how many are motivating us to fuck ourselves over in some way? Is it any wonder we make bad decisions? Bernays also made sure women smoking was placed prominently in films and magazines, because that's the best way to get people to do something. If you see it in the movies, people start to do it. When market research made it apparent that women don't like the colour of the Lucky Strike packets, he used all his contacts in retail and magazines, and he made a new fashion surrounding the company's colour. Now, I don't understand why he did this, because they could have just changed the colour of the packets, but that would have been expensive, I guess. So not only did the boom in green catch on, but the sales in Lucky Strikes just went through the roof because they were the right colour. He also sponsored classes to teach women how to smoke more sophisticatedly and to drum into them the supposed weight loss benefits of smoking. Isn't this guy just the devil? Although cigarettes are no longer advertised on TV and in magazines, they still spend huge amounts of money on advertising, and some say the removal of advertising actually made cigarette companies more profitable because they didn't have to pay for all this advertising. But it was a good thing. Cigarettes are actually marketed to children very cleverly. They're placed in places in shops where they're in children's line of sight, and they're marketed in a way that will make them feel like a treat, like there's candy all around them. In New York City alone, $213 million is spent on advertising cigarettes, and that's just in 2018. And it's advertising focused on children before they reach a smoking age, because if they can put a picture in a shop, they're going to put it somewhere where a child's going to see it. Although smoking is decreasing in Western countries, it's on the increase worldwide. In the 20th century, 100 million people have died from smoking-related illnesses. In the 21st century, that's set to be 1 billion. That's 1 billion people dead for no reason. Philip Morris are the biggest international cigarette manufacturer, and I'm not going to call them evil, but that's because they'd probably sue their cat or their grandma given the slightest opportunity. In 1971, Philip Morris's CEO, Joseph Cullen, went on television to tell the public, "It's true, babies born from women who smoke are smaller, but they're just as healthy as babies from women who don't smoke. And some women want smaller babies." Australia figured out that it would save them loads of money in public health costs if cigarettes were packaged in plain packages with pictures on the front of the effects of smoking. So they legislated to make this a thing. If you want to sell cigarettes in Australia, you've got to sell them in a plain packet. And it's helped people massively. But Philip Morris immediately sued against this hugely popular law and found themselves repeatedly defeated on appeal. They tried so desperately, but they ended up having to pay all the costs, which is like, yes. And it really works. Australia saw a drop of 100,000 smokers after the packaging came in, attributing at least a quarter of that to the packaging. That's billions of dollars of revenue for the manufacturers, though. So sneakily, Philip Morris International dug up an old trade agreement between Australia and Hong Kong, and by routing their trade through their Asian division to Australia, they were able to sue the country for brand defamation. But they lost again. Thank goodness. Australia, you officially rock. They're one of several tobacco companies to sue the Australian government. Britain also proposed a plain packaging law. We could have had this as Brits, but when PMI threatened legal action that could have run into billions and billions of pounds, the government chickened out. Philip Morris also sued the state of Uruguay. This tiny country wanted to introduce large warnings to cigarettes, and they eventually won in the international court, but the mayor of New York had to donate $500,000 to cover their court costs out of his personal money. I think that was out of his personal money. That was the way it looked in the article. The minuscule African country of Togo tried to put written warnings on their packets, but PMI threatened to sue, even though a large proportion of the populace couldn't even read. So Philip Morris has revenue of $80 billion, and Togo's entire GDP is $4.3 billion. So, like, well, if these guys sue us, we're kind of screwed either way, so they backed down. And Namibia and the Solomon Isles are just a couple more places that couldn't afford to fight the tobacco lobby, and they couldn't implement their tougher advertising laws because of that. So Philip Morris International are a perfect example of how fucking evil companies can be, and they'll take on governments, bully and defeat democracy, simply for the opportunity to kill you with their products. And they'll always find a place or a way to sell. In countries such as Indonesia, cigarettes are casually sold to children. They have booths outside of the school gates that are branded and sponsored by companies like Philip Morris. This is what they'd do to you if they had the opportunity. So how do we fight these fuckers? Next time you see an advert, see if what it is an act of manipulation. Somebody trying to control what's going on in your heart. You don't need that. Save your money. Walk by that product when you see it in the store. Spend your money on experience, because scientists repeatedly show that if you spend your money on experience rather than material goods, in the end you will be happier. Our net worth as human beings is measured by the good things that we do while we're here, not by the piles of rubbish we leave behind when we die. There's things that you can do in life that will bring you great joy and happiness, and you don't need to spend a single penny on them. And if you can't think of anything right now, just Google it. Cool things that you can do for free that don't cost you any money. In fact, don't Google it, use Ecosia, because if you go to Ecosia and you search on Ecosia, they plant trees with the money that they make, and that's got to be better than Google, who just use their money to spy on us. This is a bit of a tricky one, because it feels pretty impossible to take down $1 billion psychological manipulation industry. But it kind of is possible, because it only works in you if you take it in. At the end of the day, it's you who gets to process the heaps of data that's thrown at you every day. So my advice is, if you see a kind of brand or advert, just meet it with distrust and don't let it in. Every time you look at something on a store shelf and feel the impulse to buy it, question why you feel that impulse and if you really need it. Every time you pass something you don't need and just leave it there, reward yourself. Just give yourself a little hug, a little rush of love, and do a little dance inside, because you've won the fight. You're winning the battle when you walk on by. Let's disrupt the narrative of how they want us to measure ourselves and create a world where we judge our self-worth by how we behave towards other people and what we do with our lives, not the clothes that we wear or the size of the car we drive. And let's redefine what we consider as important. Let's not have a human race, let's have a human family. If we don't start now, our entire world will be a dull, repetitive, constant advertisement for some shit that deep down inside we know that we don't want. So what do we want? Love, happiness, belonging. And it's all completely free. It was here to begin with. Come here and have a hug. There you are. Let all the frustration that they pumped into you dissipate into the earth. Like an electrical current is flowing out of your body. Learn to love yourself just as you are, because it's a waste of life thinking that you're not enough. You're complete. You're perfect. And if we're going to start loving ourselves, we might as well do it today. Go be you, because you're a fucking beautiful, amazing individual. Until the next time, let's escape.
This is Let's Escape, a podcast about being happy and healthy in a toxic society.
We're gonna give you money you don't have, so you can buy more stuff that you don't need. When you can pay it back, well, it's a money trap. We'll pull the rug from under your feet. We're gonna give you money you don't have, so you can buy more stuff that you don't need. When you can pay it back, well, it's a money trap. We'll pull the rug from under your feet. You know you'll never be free. You know you'll never be free. Well, hey, you want a new TV? Flat screen, HD, interest-free for the first 6 weeks for a small flat fee. Will it make you happy? Will it make you happy? Well, of course it will, till you see the bill, but it's what you need. It's what I need. You know you'll never be free. Ha ha ha. You know you'll never be free. You know you'll never be free. Every day is Groundhog Day. I'm stuck upon repeat. From the bills I have to pay to the people that I meet. I followed every rule in school and I always worked dead hard. But now every day of work is cruel and it's killing off my heart. There's more to me than this. If this is life, it takes the piss. Making money for somebody else's pocket makes me want to stick my fingers in a socket. Nothing thrills me, living kills me. Do it slowly. Kill me now, lay me down. There's more to me than this. If this is life, it takes the piss. I'm working half my sorry life away, so my lazy boss can get his Porsche valet. Nothing thrills me, living kills me. Do it softly, kill me now, lay me down. We're gonna give you money you don't have, so you can buy more stuff that you don't need. We're gonna give you money you don't have, so you can buy more stuff that you don't need. Don't think
that was a song called Credit from Sam's musical called The Consumerist, part 1. That's available on iTunes and Spotify. If you want to say a bit of a thank you for making these podcasts, because we don't get paid for them. Well, I don't. I'm a figment of his blooming imagination, aren't I? So, if you fancy chucking in a couple of quid, buy The Consumerist Part 1, available on iTunes and Amazon's. And that was a bloody advert, wasn't it?